The first thing you notice is the sound, that relentless, bone-deep vibration of rotor blades carving through the night sky. Flight nurse Claire Anderson would later say that no matter how many missions she flew, that sound always settled something in her, reassurance wrapped in chaos. But on this particular night, as the helicopter sliced upward through a moonless horizon, the familiar rhythm felt different, sharper, colder, as if the darkness itself was pressing in around them. Inside the cabin, red emergency lighting washed everything in a dim glow, turning metal surfaces into silhouettes and faces into shadowed shapes. Claire moved with steady hands, tightening straps, checking IV lines, confirming oxygen flow. Her voice was calm as she ran through her checklist, even though the radio chatter outside the cabin crackled with urgency. The patient they were transporting, a middle-aged man pulled from the wreckage of a brutal car accident, was minutes from slipping beyond their reach, and everyone on board knew it. She leaned over him, studying his face beneath the oxygen mask. His name was Michael Harris, 42 years old, father, husband, mechanic. But right now, he was a body fighting a losing battle. His Glasgow Coma Scale score was a 3, the lowest possible. He had no eye response, no purposeful movement, no awareness. Patients in that state did not wake up. They did not track movement. They did not speak. Claire checked his pupils again, lifting his eyelid gently. No response, no flicker. Nothing but the fragile rise and fall of his chest, guided mostly by the equipment attached to him. Everything she saw, every sign she monitored, confirmed the same conclusion. Michael was deeply unconscious. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, something subtle, something she didn't have a name for. She had flown enough missions to recognize when a cabin felt tense because the team was tense. But this wasn't that. This was as if the air around Michael had thickened, as if the space beside him held its own kind of weight. Her medic partner Jake caught her eye for a moment. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He felt it too, the strange pressure in the cabin, the kind that made you look over your shoulder, even when you knew no one was there. Claire exhaled, trying to steady herself. Fatigue could do this. Stress could do this. But her instincts, those hard-earned ones that nurses trust more than heart monitors, kept whispering that something was coming, something she wasn't prepared for. She adjusted Michael's airway again, leaning closer, the helicopter shuddering around them as it hit a pocket of turbulence. Her hair brushed his shoulder. The cabin lights flickered. For the briefest moment, it felt as if the entire world held its breath. Then, everything changed. Michael's head moved, just slightly, just enough for Claire to see it. Not the twitch of a dying neuron, not the reflexive shift of a muscle losing tone. A deliberate turn, slow, intentional, impossible. She froze. Her hands hovered inches above him, her pulse pounding in her ears. Before she could shout for Jake, before she could even think, Michael's eyes opened, wide, focused, aware. They locked onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. Patients with a GCS of 3 do not open their eyes. They do not look at you. They do not see you. And yet here he was, staring straight through her, as if waking from a nightmare so deep that the world itself wasn't enough to anchor him. Then his lips parted. His voice, weak, raspy, impossibly deliberate, pushed through the roar of the rotors. "Don't. Let me go back." The moment froze in time, suspended between metal. A Glasgow Coma Scale score of 3 is the lowest achievable score, assigned to patients who show no eye opening, no verbalization, no purposeful movement. It is the medical equivalent of darkness. People in this state do not track voices. They do not look at the world. They do not form words. Yet as Claire read his chart before takeoff, she couldn't shake an unexpected heaviness. She'd transported dozens of unconscious patients before, but this felt different. Not because of his injuries, but because of the stillness around him. It wasn't the stillness of coma, it was something else. Something that made her glance toward him more often than usual, as if she were waiting for something she couldn't name. She noticed details she normally would have skimmed past. The grease still tucked beneath his fingernails, remnants of oil on his knuckles, the faint smell of motor fluid lingering in his hair. These were the marks of someone who worked with his hands, someone who built things, someone whose life was rooted in the physical, the tangible, the explainable. It made what happened later all the more impossible. Claire would say years afterward that understanding who Michael was made the events of that night harder to shake. It's easier to move past a memory when the person behind it remains a stranger. But Michael wasn't a stranger. He became a face she would never forget, a voice she could never unhear. And as the helicopter left the ground, she had no idea that the man lying silently before her was about to defy every medical law she'd been taught. The helicopter lifted into the night with a force that pressed everyone back into their seats. Claire felt the familiar jolt at takeoff, the way the cabin vibrated as the aircraft clawed its way upward through layers of cold, turbulent air. She braced one hand on the metal frame beside her and the other on Michael's stretcher, steadying him as the aircraft leveled out and surged forward into the darkness. Inside, the world was reduced to muted red lights, flickering instrument panels, and the steady, mechanical beeping that measured the fragile line between life and death. Claire leaned over Michael, watching the rise and fall of his chest beneath the straps that held him secure. His vitals hovered in that delicate range where any shift could mean disaster. Heart rate low but present, blood pressure barely hanging on, pupils fixed and unreactive. Everything pointed to deep, unbroken coma. She checked the airway, making sure the endotracheal tube remained in place. She listened to the rhythm of his breaths through the ventilator, a slow, unnatural cadence powered by the machine rather than the man beneath it. She reminded herself that this was routine. She had done this hundreds of times. Stabilize, monitor, reassess, repeat. But something about tonight refused to feel routine. Halfway into the flight, Claire felt a chill crawl across the back of her neck. Not the kind caused by altitude or temperature shifts, but something more instinctive, primal. The hairs on her arms rose beneath her jacket. She pulled her stethoscope free again, checking Michael's lungs, even though she had done so minutes earlier. She expected to find nothing new, and she did, but the cold didn't fade. Jake, her partner, glanced up from his charting. "You feel that?" he asked, his voice low, almost hesitant. Claire didn't answer at first. She didn't want to validate the uncomfortable truth they were both sensing. Instead, she shrugged, her expression neutral. "Probably just the cabin cooling down," she said. But the explanation didn't convince even her. The helicopter shook violently as it hit a pocket of turbulence. The lights flickered. Claire caught herself against the side rail, her knee pressing into the stretcher to keep steady. Alarms chirped briefly as sensors reacted, then her instincts warred with her training. She leaned in, her voice trembling. "Michael, what do you mean? Go back where?" His mouth barely moved. A whisper, frayed and fragile, reached her again. "They're waiting for me." A violent chill surged through her. The cabin temperature hadn't changed, but something else had, something deeper, something unseen. Claire felt pressure near her shoulder, like someone was standing right behind her. She turned sharply, searching the dim cabin, but there was no one there. Only shadows, only emptiness. Except one shadow didn't seem to belong. It lingered for a split second behind Michael's head, darker than the rest, too defined to be a trick of light. A human shape without features, watching, waiting. She blinked, and it was gone. Her pulse hammered. She looked at Jake, desperate for confirmation, but he was staring at Michael, eyes wide. Claire, did he just wake up? Before she could form a response, the monitor screamed. Michael's body slackened, his eyes rolled upward. The awareness drained from his face like someone had flipped a switch inside him. Then the flat line hit, a single piercing tone that filled the cabin. "No, no, come on!" Claire dropped into action instantly, climbing onto the edge of the stretcher, starting compressions with practiced precision. The helicopter lurched as Jake adjusted the equipment, calling readings over the radio, but Claire barely heard him. Her world had narrowed to the rhythm of her hands pressing into Michael's chest, fighting a battle that had begun long before she ever met him. She counted compressions, her voice breaking. She didn't want to think about the words he had spoken. She didn't want to imagine what or who he had seen. She wanted only one thing: to pull him back, to keep him here. But deep down, beneath the adrenaline and panic, a quiet dread whispered the truth. Michael hadn't been afraid of dying. He'd been afraid of something else, something waiting beyond the reach of medicine. And now, that line had gone still. The helicopter touched down with a violent jolt, the wheels skidding against the landing pad before settling. Claire barely registered the movement. Her hands were still on Michael's chest, still locked into the rhythm of compressions, even as the door slid open and the trauma team rushed forward. The moment fresh air hit her face, she felt reality slam back into her. The cold morning wind, the floodlights, the shouting voices. But none of it dulled the echo of Michael's whisper still ringing in her ears. The trauma team swept him away in seconds. Claire followed at their heels, breathless, shaken, trying to switch back into professional mode, even though her mind hadn't caught up. Inside the emergency bay, bright white lights cut across the chaos. Gloved hands, clipped voices, the slap of equipment being passed from one physician to another. A crash cart was pulled into position. Medications were drawn up and pushed. The ventilator hissed mechanically as the team took over. Claire stepped back, forcing herself to give space. She watched as the attending physician, a seasoned trauma doctor with a reputation for calm under pressure, took command. "Starting another round, let's go." His voice was steady, firm, familiar. Normally it grounded her, but today, nothing felt grounding. Minutes stretched into something unrecognizable. Every second that passed drove home the same truth. Michael's heart wasn't coming back, not this time. Claire knew it, the team knew it, even the monitors seemed to know it, their flat line refusing to waver. Finally, the attending let out a quiet breath, one that carried resignation rather than defeat. He glanced at the clock. Time of death, 04:17. The room fell still, the kind of stillness that always came after the storm, heavy, settling, unavoidable. Claire felt it sink into her bones. She pulled off her gloves slowly, mechanically, trying to keep her hands from shaking. "Anything unusual on the flight?" the attending asked as he scribbled notes, not looking up. Routine question, standard protocol. Claire opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Jake didn't deny it. He didn't confirm it either. He just stared at the floor and whispered, "Some things are better left alone." Then he left the room without another word. A week after Michael's death, Claire asked the charge nurse for permission to reach out to his family. She told herself it was for closure, for them and for her. Michael's wife, Emily, greeted her with soft eyes and a voice worn thin by grief. Their home was filled with photographs of a life that looked whole and warm and painfully normal. They sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around mugs of untouched tea, sharing memories. Emily spoke about Michael's laugh, the way he hummed when he worked on engines, the pride he had for their kids. Then, after a long silence, Claire gently asked, "Did Michael ever talk about being afraid of something? Of going back somewhere?" Emily's expression changed instantly. Her eyes glistened. She nodded slowly. "When he was little, he used to have these nightmares. He'd wake up screaming that someone was trying to drag him into a dark place. He never fully grew out of it." Claire felt the same cold she'd felt in the helicopter creeping up her spine. She didn't share what she had witnessed. She simply squeezed Emily's hand and whispered, "I'm so sorry." On the drive home, she couldn't stop thinking about it. The nightmares, the fear, the whisper. None of it made sense. None of it belonged in the world of monitors and medications she trusted. But the truth settled around her with a weight she couldn't deny. Some experiences don't fit inside medical textbooks. Some moments defy the boundaries of life and death. And some questions aren't meant to be answered. Weeks passed, seasons shifted. New patients filled the stretchers. New shifts blurred together, and the rhythm of flight nursing settled back into its relentless cycle. But for Claire, something fundamental had changed. Something she couldn't name, something she couldn't ignore. Michael's whisper still lived in the back of her mind, rising in the quiet moments between rotor blades and radio calls. One night, long after the city below had fallen into a patchwork of distant lights, Claire found herself alone in the hangar. Her shift had ended, but she hadn't gone home. Instead, she sat on an overturned supply crate, staring at the helicopter that had carried her through that haunting night. The hangar lights cast long shadows across the floor, stretching toward the aircraft as if drawn to it. She breathed deeply, letting the cold air settle into her lungs. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to confront what she had been avoiding. The possibility that not everything she experienced could be explained within the boundaries of medicine. She replayed every detail, searching for cracks where logic might slip in and take over. But the facts stood unshaken. Michael had been comatose. His brain scan showed devastation incompatible with speech. He should not have been able to open his eyes. He should not have been able to speak. And no scientific theory fully explained the terror she saw in his expression. A soft rustle echoed from the back of the hangar. She looked up, half expecting to see Jake or another crew member. But there was no one, just the wind pressing against the metal walls, low and mournful. Her thoughts drifted back to something Emily had said. The nightmares from childhood, the dark place Michael feared being dragged back to. Claire had held on to that detail more tightly than she meant to. It suggested something old, something persistent, something that followed him. But what did that mean? She was trained in anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, not the metaphysical shadows people sometimes carry with them. A sudden memory surfaced, one she had pushed aside until now. The moment after Michael's body was wheeled away, when the trauma bay fell silent. She had felt something then, not a presence exactly, but the absence of one, as if whatever had clung to him in the helicopter had left with him. The air in the hangar felt heavier now, not frightening, just charged, as though acknowledging the truth she hadn't dared to say aloud. Some experiences mark you,